Okay, so in the previous study unit we covered, which is study unit 2, we talked about the different models that you can use when you're developing software. Okay? And these models are not to be confused with the approaches, because the focus of today's lecture is on the approaches you can use to developing software. So ultimately, the approach that you go with, it determines the model that you adopt. Okay, so we spoke about the spiral model, we spoke about the incremental model, we spoke about the
How
waterfall
was it?
model. Yes, yes. Can you? I hear Eugene's voice. Eugene, do you have a question? Are you having difficulty hearing, or is
no,
there a
everything
question?
is fine. Say, I would like to pass and graduate. Say.
Okay, Eugene, we understand that you always say that in the WhatsApp group. Maybe later on in the lecture, then you can ask other questions. But let us proceed.
Okay, say.
I hope you do pass and graduate, Eugene, like everyone else.
Okay, say.
So so yes, so what I was saying is that the approach you choose when you're developing software ultimately determines the model you use. Okay, and there are two approaches. There's the plan, what we call the plan-driven approach or the traditional approach, and then we also have the agile approach. Now, today's lecture is focused around the agile approach to developing software. So, what are the learning outcomes? You so you're going to have a thorough understanding of agile software development methods, the agile manifesto, and difference between plan-driven and agile development. Be able to outline and evaluate agile development practices, evaluate and apply the Scrum approach to agile project development, analyze and justify the issues of scaling agile development methods and combining agile approaches with plan-driven approaches in the development of software systems. So just a quick introduction. So of course, there's a thorough need to understand the agile software development methods and its manifesto. When you're talking about an agile manifesto, we are basically talking about the philosophy of this agile approach. What difference does it make in the development of a project? Okay. And students must clearly evaluate the main difference between agile and plan-driven development, of which our focus is on the agile development practices. And I mentioned that in the earlier slide, the first slide, that our focus today is on the agile development practices because they've been so widely adopted in many projects, and they do have some sort of more additional benefits as opposed to the driven one. And at the end of this unit, the students must have a clear understanding that pair programming and extreme programming are the best practices to be used in agile development. And we're also going to cover that later on in the lecture. Okay, so when we talk about being agile, what does agile actually mean? And agile is the ability to create and respond to change. It is a way of dealing with and ultimately succeeding in an uncertain and turbulent environment. Okay? So when you're dealing with the uncertain or turbulent environment, there's a need, or you need a way that you can sort of handle that pressure. And so agile, the word agile itself means the ability to adjust or adapt to change. And the methods talk about the different practices and processes and practices that we adopt. Now, the Agile Manifesto is as follows. So with the Agile Manifesto, we believe in individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So we encourage collaboration. So people brainstorming, getting together and thinking of ideas, as opposed to having some sort of static processes that need to follow. So here we encourage collaboration between individuals, and we value working software over comprehensive documentation. And what this means is that we do not spend too much time trying to draft documentation, because that's one of the issues with the plan-driven approach, is that the team spends so much time trying to make the documentation perfect, okay? That sometimes it ends up even delaying the project. So here, we do not really, it's not that we don't do any documentation, but we're not really focused on it, because remember, our mindset is that there's changes that are bound to come. So we don't focus a lot on documentation, and we just value creating a quality working product. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So you are building the software for the customer, and most of the time, if you're going to be working with the customer and you're a service provider, you're going to have some sort of contractual agreement, okay, which is binding. Now, with the Agile Manifesto, we do not really tie ourselves to a contract with the customer, because some of the things may change in the project, okay? Remember that since the requirement, it's very hard to be tied to a contract where the requirements are dynamic and the conditions are changing. So the Agile Manifesto does not really cater for contract negotiations between the two parties, the customer and the service provider. And then responding to change over following a plan, okay? Yes, we're being agile, we're adapting to changing environment, as opposed to adopting a standardized plan in the project. So these are the different components that make up this Agile Manifesto. So when you talk about agile software development, so agile software development is centered around the idea of iterative development. Remember, iterative development talks about building software in mini projects. So we create mini projects, which are called iterations, and we assign them to different team members, and each mini project will sort of have its own specific deadlines at which it must be delivered to the market. So this agile software development is centered around that idea, taking a project, breaking it up, and giving it to different people in the organization. Agile methods or agile processes promote disciplined project management process that encourages frequent inspection, adaptation, and leadership. And what this means is that there needs to be, because there's a lack of formalities in the agile approach, there needs to be frequent inspection. And you need to bring the project team together as frequently as possible, so that you'll be able to discuss the matters that are concerning the project, because there's always constantly new developments, and getting people on the same page is very important, okay? So we need really disciplined project management processes. Without these disciplined project management processes, then there's going to be a lot of chaos, and the project will slowly start to lose its structure. Okay, so for the mere fact, you need to have some sort of remember, formalities and documentation help you to track the project as you go along, which means everybody's going to sort of be on the same page by looking through the documentation, even if you weren't there day one of the project, but they give you access to the documentation. You can sort of update yourself. But with the agile philosophy, you need to take the initiative as part of the project team to keep yourself updated. And one of the ways you can do this is sort of attending the meetings, okay? So everybody has to demonstrate some sort of leadership skills, okay? So principles of agile methods: customer involvement. Customers or users of the system must be actively involved throughout the development process. Okay, so with the agile philosophy, we need the customer constantly involved in the project. The plan-driven approach, we only speak to the customer during the initial planning phase, okay? Then once we've done that, then we generate documentation, and then from there, the project team just sort of delivers the product. But with the agile philosophy, we need the customer involved. And in some instances, the customer is actually, while a representative from the customer, or the organization we're doing the software for, is normally kept on site. So we want to have a representative from the organization on site, and the person is responsible for reporting back to their organization on the progress of the project. But it goes both ways as well, because they help the development team get updates on any requirements that may have changed. And also embracing change. If requirements change during development, there's a need to accommodate that change, okay? And you mentioned that already. Incremental delivery. Agile methods use incremental approach, where functionalities are developed and released in increments. So we have different, since we break the projects down into iterations, we have mini projects, and we sort of multiple deadlines, all leading up to the generic deadline of when the project should be delivered to the market. And incremental delivery is actually very good, because you're able to measure your progress to say, okay, so for iteration 1 and 2, we met the deadlines. So clearly we're on the right pace, or moving at the correct pace, as opposed to the project plan-driven approach, where you all sort of work to the end result or the delivery date, and there's no way of measuring your pace between the time you start the project and the time you're supposed to deliver it. So maintain simplicity as well. The software must be as simple as possible. Complexities must be avoided wherever possible during development, okay? So make it as simple as possible, because remember, you're working with different people as well. So make sure that you sort of code this project in a simple manner, in code or in programming logic that's going to be easy to interpret, okay? And people, not processes, already mentioned earlier. The development team must have the necessary skills so that software can be developed within the specific time. We're more concerned about recruiting people with the correct skills than we are with actually following processes, defined process. Yes, we follow standards, but there's no set process that we adopt to the project, okay? We just sort of do things up until they are correct and they are quality. The agile development techniques. So these are the following practices that are aligned to the extreme programming methodology. So what is extreme programming? So extreme programming is when you have more than one developer working on a particular unit or a particular component of the software. We also refer to it as pair programming, okay? Why do we have these developers together working on one component? To ensure quality. And with extreme programming, what happens is that we have peer reviewing of code. So the one developer will sort of review the code of the other developer. So they'll sort of review each other's code, okay? So in essence, they have to understand similar programming languages as well. So these are some of the practices of extreme programming. We have continuous integration. The moment a task is completed, the task must be integrated into the whole system. Integration takes place after the module has passed unit testing. So after the peer reviews their code, they sort of go into this unit testing or component testing phase. And after that, then that's when they can sort of integrate these components they were working on into the larger project. The next one is collective ownership. The development team must take ownership of the software. They should take full responsibility of the software under development. Remember that we're assigning 2 people to this component. So the possibility of having errors or having problems with the unit or component that they're working on should be largely reduced. If we well, they're only human, so you're still going to experience some problems, but we don't expect like obvious issues, okay? When you have 2 people assigned to work on a particular component, one would sort of do the creating and the other one would moderate to double check the person's work. So there's some sort of collective ownership and people should take full responsibility. Incremental planning. Tasks are released in increments and there is a need for planning on the story cards. Story cards are executed according to the ones with the highest priority. Okay, so we're able to also, not only are we able to create mini projects, but we're also able to prioritize these mini projects to say, perhaps we can start with these particular features because they are the most essential or they're the core features of this system. So you're able to plan your increments as well. Which ones are you going to do first to address first in the project? On-site customer. During the development process, a representative from an organization must always be available. And I mentioned that earlier, why it's important to have a rep from the customer. Pair programming. Developers work in pairs. Each pair consists of experts in a specific field. They check on each other's work as so to produce the best code. Okay. Yes, it's a quality measure, and that's what extreme programming is all about. Assigning more than one person to a particular task or a unit, and we want to produce the best code for that particular unit. Then also there's an aspect of refactoring. Refactoring it means we take a second look at the code. We look at it and we try to see how we can make it more efficient or what can we improve in the code. So the whole concept of refactoring code is making improvements to your code, okay? Maybe when you wrote the program initially, you were under pressure and then you want to make some sort of changes and improve your code so that it's easy to read for the next person. So that's what refactoring is all about. And they say developers need to refactor the code continuously if there are any new process improvements or changes, okay? And follow a simple design. The software must be designed in a simple and easy understandable manner. Small releases, the software is developed in increments and released in small releases as long as there is functionality which brings business value. Sustainable pace. During the development process, overtime is not acceptable as this can strain the customers. Okay, remember that you want the customer in the agile approach, you want the customer as involved as possible. So if you're going to be working overtime as well as the project, it means that also the customer rep that you have on site must be there overtime. Okay, so that could end up frustrating the customer. So with the agile approach, try to avoid overtime as much as possible. Test first development. This is an automated unit test framework, which is used to write tests to test certain functionality before the actual mode or unit is implemented. So first test locally before we deploy, okay? And I said to you guys last week that testing locally helps you to understand the conditions or the errors that may arise in the module that you're working on locally, but the conditions may be different in the production environment. So you need to test both locally. Then also when you deploy, you test the functionality when it's integrated into the larger project. So what are the benefits? What are the benefits of adopting agile methodology as opposed to the plan-driven one? Okay, so we work in an incremental way, which is much easier to delegate tasks to other individuals. Okay, so in a sense, delegation, you can do some sort of delegation in an incremental way. Faster and smaller. We can deliver the first or early working version of the software faster, and we can call it a prototype. Immediately we can, with the Agile philosophy, because there's no predefined plan of the requirement, we can just create an early working version, call it a prototype, give it to the customer. The customer works on it or looks at it and reviews it and gives us feedback. Okay, so in that essence, we can deliver an early working version faster, but also this agile methodology works perfectly for small projects. Okay, it was built for big projects, but we will talk about that in the other slide. So communication. With the agile philosophy, we value interaction between individuals. So therefore, we need people to be able to communicate, and there's different tools that you can use to communicate if you're working. I mean, there's Medium and all of these softwares that are available, modern softwares that are available to facilitate that communication. Most people would just say use email, but yes, email is professional, but there are more modern systems or tools out there that you can use for project management purposes that can actually assist you to track the progress as well. So communication is there. People communicate effectively in the agile philosophy. Feedback is measured. Okay, that's what I meant when I said in iterations. To each iteration, we measure whether it was delivered on time, and we're able to measure the deadline that you have to deliver the project, whether we're actually going to meet it or not. Trust between the development team. So the people that are forming part of the development team ultimately have to trust each other. We have to trust that the other person is actually doing what they're supposed to do. This reminds me of something that I wanted to say. Just imagine you guys, before the COVID thingy hit, we had group assignments, okay? Now, you see the difficulty with, and this forms part of not the advantages, but the disadvantages of using the agile philosophy, is that, okay, yes, we have a group assignment where we have different group members, and we delegate sort of question 1 to the one person and question 2 to the next person. Okay, we sort of have to trust that the other person will, number one, go home and actually do the work. Okay, then next we have to trust that they're actually going to do it properly. Okay, so here with the agile philosophy, we work on trust more than anything, because there's no formal documentation that tells the person how to do question 1, how to do question 2. So they're just going to actually sort of do it the way they think it should be done. And that's exactly what happens in the agile philosophy. People have different beliefs and they do things differently, and we just have to sort of trust each other. Okay, adjust to change as well, and we mentioned that earlier. So when it comes to the agile methodology, there are 2 main methods that are used or adopted. We have the Scrum, and then we have extreme programming. There are other ones which you can look into in your own time, but these are the 2 we want to focus on. Okay, what is the difference between the 2? So with the Scrum methodology, we have, as part of the project team, the project owner, who in this particular case will be the customer, the person we're doing the project for, whoever's sponsoring the project. Then we have someone we call the Scrum Master, okay? And this person will be basically a senior developer. Then we have the people that form part of the project team, okay? So here with the Scrum, we sort of have someone who's in charge, who's the senior who's in charge, and everybody else just forms part of the development team. Okay, unlike extreme programming, where people work in pairs and review each other. Okay, so here everything is done to the Scrum Master, and the reason why we adopt Scrum is when we have a lot of backlog or a lot of things to do in a limited time frame, and we sort of just have to push these things with overtime. So we create a list of this backlog. We create a list, and we call these items in the list, we refer to them as sprints. Okay. Now, once a sprint has started, it cannot be interrupted, or the customer cannot come back and say, hey, look, I forgot to tell you this. So once the sprint has started, it has started. Okay. So that is the Scrum philosophy. It involves doing a to-do list of all the backlog that you have. And we call these items or tasks, we refer to them as sprints. And we work overtime to make sure that they are done, okay? And of course, there'll be some sort of sequencing as well to prioritize these sprints as well as to which ones are more high priority. What these two approaches have in common is that at the end, there will be some sort of review of code, okay, or testing or validation, okay? And here in the Scrum model, the Scrum Master is the one who's responsible for the code that has been written by the team. Here, developers can modify and refactor parts of the code as the need arises, okay? So here, this peer review, extreme programming involves pair programming, peer reviewing of code. Scrum, there's one senior person, and the rest just are in general part of the development team, okay? So Scrum and extreme programming share some sort of similarities, but they are different in the sense that Scrum is for more of trying to meet or cater for the backlog, and extreme programming is pair programming. People work in separate desks in teams, in smaller teams. What are the problems associated with agile methods? They are more or most appropriate on small, simple systems. And what the first point means is that, remember that the agile philosophy was invented for complex big systems anyway, because there was no way at which you can use a plan-driven approach or predetermine the requirements of a complex system. But this agile philosophy approach to complex systems is not the perfect fix. Definitely there are challenges, and the challenges are more of a human factor issue more than anything, because you're working with different people with different personalities. You're basically managing different personalities more than anything. So the agile approach is perfect. It works perfectly for small projects, small team, which means there's going to be a small team, and you can sort of bring everybody, put everybody in the same room together and have a briefing session. Now, what is the challenge when you have a big complex project? The challenge is that there's too many people, and sometimes it's not even possible. I mean, picture organizations like Facebook and Google, they have thousands of developers working there. So how do you bring everybody into the room at the same time and try to brief them? So those are some of the challenges, and it works perfectly, this agile approach on small, simple systems. It is ideal for new systems and not systems undergoing maintenance. So it's best suited for systems that you are building from scratch, where you're uncertain about the requirements, not when you're doing maintenance. I mean, maintenance is fairly straightforward. You sort of have an understanding of what needs to be done. So there's no need to adopt an agile philosophy for maintenance. Agile development may not be compatible with the legal approach to contract definition used in large companies. Whenever you're rendering a service for a customer, having a contract in place is a way of protecting yourself. So in the event that one of the parties breaches the contract, you can sort of dispute it in a court of law. But there's a big challenge with agile development, because we do not stress contractual or binding contracts, okay? We don't focus on contract definitions. So then if one party doesn't sort of live up to the agreements? How do we hold them accountable? Okay, that's one of the biggest challenges as well. So there is no documentation. It is not easy to engage customers or end users throughout software development. Yes, since there's no documentation, there's little ceremony or limited meetings. Actually, not that there is no documentation, but it's just limited. We don't do as much. Maybe initially we want to do a specification document with use case diagram drawings and ARDs and so forth, but we do not stress on that. It's not set in stone, and it's due to change as the project progresses. It's not easy now to engage with these customers during the software development process. And then we have, at the last one, at times it's difficult to have continuity in the development team. That continuity means to have everybody on the same page or the same understanding, because we might host a meeting and then have maybe even two people not pitching at the meeting can have some sort of adverse effect on the project, okay? So we need somebody on the same page. We need everybody on the mutual understanding of when the deadline is and where particular iterations should be delivered. So having continuity is a very big challenge for the development team, okay? So these are the problems associated with the agile methods. They're not perfect. They're not the perfect fit, okay, or perfect fix rather, but they are definitely more suitable for complex systems as opposed to plan-driven approach, because they eliminate the risk. So in conclusion, agile methods are iterative and mostly used by small organizations where simple and small projects are developed, because that's easier to manage. Agile development is approximately used where documentation is not needed and where software must be developed within a short time frame. So when the customer says, I need you to at least produce something by next week, you need to recognize the fact that there's no way you could have planned everything for the requirements beforehand within 1 week. So you call the first version a prototype, and that's what it's all about. So you can deliver within a short period of time. Software engineers need to decide whether to use plan-driven or agile approach depending on the type of software being developed. So you need to choose which one you want to use, plan-driven or agile approach, considering the pros and cons to both, and also considering the type of software that you are developing. Systems developed using agile methods accommodates changes and can be developed within a short period of time, unlike the plan-driven approach, okay? Remember, with the plan-driven approach, there's only one delivery date, which is the time at which we deploy the system into the market. That's the only delivery date. If you projected that it's going to take 1 year to do this project, it means that the customer will only experience it after 12 months, okay? So with this agile approach, they sort of can test it earlier than that, okay? So guys, that's in a nutshell a study unit 3 covering the agile software development approach, okay? I see, Eugene, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Say I've got a question, sir.